Hey guys, welcome back to I guess what will be part B to our March 16th lecture. The software I'm using only allows me to do a 15-minute recording, and I ran out of time before I realized what was happening. So I'll pick up where I left off, explaining antigenic drift. And like we said in the last part of the video there, the antigenic drift are when the virus undergoes very small changes, usually to the H and the N's antigens that are on the outside of the flu virus. So a point mutation is when we have usually just one nucleotide change. So if you think about DNA structure, we get an A or a T or a G or a C. One of those changes just slightly, or we get a little tiny change in those letter orders, and we end up going from the type of antigen we see on this virus to the type of antigen we see on this virus. Those little changes are enough to sneak past our immune system. Our antibodies won't recognize the changes, and as a result, we get a slight change in the virus, and that virus will be able to make us sick from season to season. So antigenic drift is how we end up with a different flu virus each year, which is why you can get sick each year from the influenza virus. So if we look on this slide here, on the top part, we get an example of antigenic drift. We have our flu virus on the left side here. We get a point mutation that changes the hemagglutinin or neuraminidase, and then we end up with a virus that looks slightly different here on the right. Now this is the difference between a flu that you'd get in 2019 and now a flu you'd get in 2020. So that's antigenic drift. The next principle or property we're going to look at of viruses is called antigenic shift. Now antigenic shift is a much more complicated process, and it leads to a very different outcome. If you look down here on the bottom part of the slide, we get a virus here that's from a human, and we get a virus here that's from a bird. So human H2N2 and avian H3N8. Now it's quite possible that these viruses can be in the same organism, and this organism can be many different things. We've seen examples of it. Birds and pigs are probably the most common, but we can also see camels, snakes, and in the case of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, the pangolin was an intermediate host. So what happens are these two viruses, they get into the same cell in a common organism, and their genes between the two viruses switch. So we end up with two viruses going into a cell and a brand new virus that we've never seen before coming out of the cell. And this is called antigenic shift. Now, antigenic shift results from gene reassortment. So gene reassortment means we get exchange of genes from two different viruses. So a large part of the viral genome is exchanged inside an infected cell. So the virus that's produced is antigenically quite different from the two viruses that went in. That means that if you had antibodies in your immune system, in your body, that were circulating, they would not be able to recognize or fight this new combined virus genome. This is the type of genetic reassortment that leads to brand new viruses that we've never encountered before. So the examples are H5N1, which was the bird flu, H1N1, which was the swine flu, and now antigenic shift, so the gene reassortment of two viruses in the same cell, this can lead to pandemics. And a pandemic is when we have a worldwide infection, and I'll talk more about that in a following slide. So a question there on the slide is, why do you think most flu outbreaks originate in China? And as we've seen, the most recent virus that's been released on the world, I guess, did in fact come from China. And the reason why is because in China, there's lots of situations where humans and animals live very, very closely together. So, for example, birds, pigs, bats, snakes, pangolins, if they come in contact with humans, there's a chance that a human virus can infect them. Now, if another virus is already in their cells, this is when we can get the opportunity of antigenic shift happening. So this is why we see a lot of flu outbreaks coming from China. And it's not just China, of course. It's any country where you'd have humans and animals, different species of animals living very closely together. So this is an interesting slide, and this is showing antigenic drift, and it's showing a virus that has many different genes. So it's got 8 different genes. And if you look onto the right side of the slide, you'll see where these genes originated from. So this gene here, avian, this one here, avian, avian, these all came from birds. Here, human or swine, so human or pig, swine, and another one that's human or pig, swine, and another swine gene. So this virus, over a long period of time, has been incorporated into probably a pig or a swine, and it's come in contact with bird viruses and human viruses, and we've had gene reassortment, and we end up with a virus that looks like this or has a genome that looks like this. Again, this is another video for you guys to check out. It's going to show you some of the basic principles of antigenic shift. And another really clever picture here showing how sorry, the viruses from birds and humans can become exposed to each other or come in contact with each other in an intermediary organism, which in this case is a pig. This could be a camel in the case of MERS, for example. It could be a pangolin, which is the case of COVID, SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19, or people are commonly calling it. And as a result of that, we get a virus that is quite different from the 2 viruses that entered. So when that happens, we get this genetic recombination. The antibodies that we have in our body already are ineffective against this new virus. So the new virus can infect cells without being slowed down by the immune system. Now, these new viruses, because of antigenic shift, can lead to a human pandemic. Now, you've heard this news a lot you've heard this word used in the news a lot recently. What is a pandemic? Well, a pandemic has 3 different principles. One, it's a new virus to which general population has no immunity. So SARS-CoV-2, or the disease that it causes, commonly called COVID-19, this was a brand new virus that originated in China in late November, early December 2019, and it was exposed to the human population, and nobody had ever encountered this virus before. So there was no immunity whatsoever in the entire human population. So that had all the means to create a pandemic. Now, the second part of a pandemic would be this virus is able to replicate in humans, and it can cause disease. One example that we're given here is the H5N1, which is the avian flu, and it was a rare flu. It wasn't terribly common, but it had a 60% human mortality rate. That meant that 60% of the people who were infected died because of it. So that's a very, very strong, powerful virus, that causes a lot of damage. So being able to replicate in humans and cause disease is another facet of being a pandemic. And COVID-19 is also showing that it can replicate in humans and it can cause disease. So another tick for COVID-19. And then finally, the third one is it's able to transmit efficiently from human to human. So the virus can get inside of a human respiratory tract, replicate, and then be spread to a healthy or another human being. And as we can see from the examples in the news recently, the cases of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is increasing all over the place. except for China now. Actually, it's actually starting to show some slowing trends, which is fantastic. But it can efficiently go from human to human. Okay, this is a great slide, and this is showing a bit of history in influenza viruses, and it's showing how antigenic shift has caused some major pandemics in the world. So if we look back to the 1918 Spanish influenza, which was a major flu, it caused a lot of deaths. We look at the genome of this virus right here. You can see all of the different chromosomes, and they're all represented by these green squiggly lines. So there's going to be our chromosomes, 8 genetic segments that thought to have come from a bird and spread to a human. Several years later, this virus that caused the Spanish flu came into contact with another avian virus. So if we look at the next scene here in 1957, this virus right here, this is our H1N1 from 1918, combined with another avian virus, so another bird virus, and we had antigenic shift, and we ended up with another virus, brand new virus called H2N2. Now if you look at this, you can see that there's chromosomes from H1N1 and chromosomes from H1, the green ones from H1N1 and the red ones from H2N2. So you can see how we get a major change in the genetics of two different viruses when they come together and reassort. Now if we move along to 1968, the Hong Kong influenza, we get our H2N2 virus. So again, we get the chromosomes from the H2N2 virus. It's come in contact with another avian virus here, which has got the yellow chromosomes, and that results in another genetic recombination. So we've got green chromosomes from H1N1. We get some of the red ones from the H2N2, and now we're getting yellow chromosomes from the H3 avian virus. So this is our H3N2, which is known as the Hong Kong influenza. And again, this was a pretty serious flu epidemic in 1968. Now we're moving into 2020, and we've got our possibly H3N2 influenza virus, and our next pandemic has been called COVID-19. It's not exactly an influenza virus. It is a coronavirus though, and it's causing a pandemic right now. And this is why we're actually doing these lessons online as opposed to in face-to-face. So another great video for you guys to check out showing influenza and antigenic shift. Again, watch this one showing you the differences between antigenic drift and antigenic shift. And finally, we can talk about the treatment of the influenza virus. Of course, you guys know there's not much you can do to treat a flu. We do have some antiviral meds like zanamivir, Relenza, and Tamiflu, which is probably one of the most common ones you'll hear. And these will target neuraminidase. So what it does is it blocks the virus's ability, once it's inside the cell, to get out. If it gets into the cell and it can't get out, that means we limit the spread and the transmission of the virus. Right now, of course, viral medications and vaccines are top priority for labs all over the world as we need to fight this new pandemic, which is confronting the world right now. So we should probably see some new antiviral medications coming out in the future. But as we've been preaching to everybody and trying to get everybody to listen, preventative measures are often the best way to fight a virus. So making sure you wash your hands, you use barriers, so masks or something to cover your eyes, you cough into your elbow, and you distance yourself socially, you should be okay to prevent a virus. And last, here's one more video you can watch that shows how we can treat flu using antiviral drugs. Okay, thanks a lot for today, guys. Talk to you later.